Portuguese competent body for EU Ecolabel commends you for considering applying for an EU Ecolabel license. As you are probably aware, EU Ecolabel is known as a top environmental quality licensing scheme built by the European Union. To begin your application, you should proceed with the following steps. The first step in applying for an EU Ecolabel is to clearly identify the product group that matches the product or service you are registering. Navigate in the EU Ecolabel website to find out all the relevant documentation for your product group. If you are having trouble locating this documentation, we recommend you to check our video tutorial on gathering relevant documentation in the EU Ecolabel website. You should carefully read the associated criteria legislation, user manuals, or fact sheets to ensure that your product falls within its scope. Also, remember that whenever the European Commission displays document templates to submit your application data, we recommend that you use them. After going through the relevant documentation, you must pre-register your product or service in the online EU Ecolabel product catalog or in the EU Ecolabel tourist accommodation catalog, both known as ECAT. Remember that all license holders are responsible for registering their products and services in ECAT to ensure license traceability after it is awarded. Please have in mind that you should only pre-register your product if you are ready to submit your application within the next 30 days. So take a look on the next steps to find out what else you need. Next, you will gather all necessary supporting documentation. Remember that all of these documents will have to be in Portuguese to be considered valid, as this is the official language for the Portuguese competent body. Your application will contain the following documents: a request letter addressed to the Directorate General for Economic Activities, the product or service form completed. Again, we remind you that this form will always have to be filled in Portuguese. A complete descriptive summary, which will include a description of your business model, a list of products or services you want to certify, the description of your product or services target group, information about your turnover, and any additional elements that facilitate the verification of compliance with the criteria defined in the EU decision. All the declarations issued by manufacturers and/or suppliers of raw materials, products, and/or equipment according to the models of the European Commission. All technical and safety data sheets of raw materials and/or products used in the manufacturing process or in your service. All applicable test reports. All applicable certificates of traceability and sustainability. Any additional elements that facilitate the verification of compliance with the criteria set forth by the European Commission's decision. Remember that the user manuals displayed on the European Commission's website identified in Step 1 will contain all necessary information on how to apply for the EU Ecolabel. Now that you have gathered all supporting documentation, it is time to submit your application package both in physical and digital formats. The physical format of your application package should be sent to Digai address as shown on the screen. The digital version of your application package should be sent to the email address provided on the screen. We remind you that every calculation needs to be sent in Excel spreadsheet format. Competent bodies charge fees on an individual basis in accordance with the limits and rules set out in Annex 3 of the Regulation 66/2010 of the European Parliament and of the Council, which establishes the rules and limits for EU Ecolabel fees. So, before the application gets to be reviewed, you will need to pay the application fee according to the information presented in the table on the screen. Reductions are available for micro-enterprises and SMEs, companies from developing countries, and companies registered under EMAS or certified under ISO 14001. Applicants registered with EMAS have a 30% reduction in the rate, and applicants certified according to ISO 14001 have a 15% reduction in the rate. The reductions are not cumulative, the highest reduction will apply. This reduction does not apply to the annual fee. Have in mind that the application and extension fee's final cost is based on the number of product formulas you present in your application, taking into consideration the European Commission's definition of product components that are stated in the product group's respective user manuals. Check the cost of your application fee and transfer the corresponding amount to the bank presented on the screen using the BIC code presented. After concluding this operation, you should email the proof of payment for both email addresses provided on the screen. After this step, DGI will contact the applicant if any issues are detected in the pending application, such as missing documentation or additions to the application. The average time for the application review is 3 months as long as the application correctly follows instructions. After this, your application shall be presented to the selection committee, which is comprised of DGI and the Portuguese Environment Agency. After the selection committee approval, you will be requested to pay your first annual fee. This amount will be dependent on when your application is processed. Check DGI's website on applicable fees to find the formula to know the amount to pay. DGI will then send you a receipt guide to transfer the correspondent amount to the bank presented on the screen. After concluding this operation, you should email the proof of payment to both email addresses provided on the screen. After that step, your organization can display the EU Ecolabel logo on the awarded products. Remember that you have to display the logo according to the EU Ecolabel logo guidelines and always presenting the license code below the logo. This code begins with the country of registration, Y refers to the product group, and Z refers to the number given by the competent body. That's it, you learned all the necessary steps for applying to EU Ecolabel. If you want to know more, keep exploring this page as well as the European Commission's website on EU Ecolabel. We hope to see you soon.